Guten Morgen, Leute. My name is Joran, founder of Redditus. We are going to do this in English today, sorry. This is going to be a live podcast on the Grow Your B2B SaaS podcast. I'm the host, a founder myself, and I interview other founders on how they take certain challenges. My guest, Torben Schulz, co-founder and CEO of Rows. Today we're going to talk about how to create a product strategy where you can beat Excel and Google Sheets. Before we dive in, why should people listen to you today?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm also just coming out of a cold, so if I'm coughing, I apologize. You will have to live through it with me. Joran might have some great jokes in the meantime. Well, why should people listen to me? I think I'm a second-time founder from Germany. The first company that I founded was actually with Rocket Internet. My background is actually not super technical. I have a management consulting and entrepreneurial background, and I've been an avid spreadsheet user all my life. But I think the real reason to listen to me is probably because I founded Rows, which is on the very bold mission to become the world's best spreadsheets. And on this, why did we do this? Because, well, who in here uses spreadsheets in the audience? So kind of everyone, I guess. I think everybody has a spreadsheet. But spreadsheets are a technology that is already 40 years old. So very old technology that has adapted over time with a very large market. So between 1 and 2 billion people in the world use spreadsheets. So if you crack this, you can build a very, very large company. And we do see that given that it's a 40 years old technology and Google Sheets, the latest bigger invention in spreadsheets with collaboration, was in 2006, the year before the iPhone was launched, which changed our world and the way we do business quite a lot. In the meantime, we also had, hundreds and thousands of SaaS companies that need to talk to each other, tens of thousands of APIs that need to exchange data and that we want to use. So those were really the issues that we wanted to solve. One around a better interface that is also built for the cell phone, so that as a consumer of data, you can actually consume and interact with your data built on your spreadsheets while on the go. And the other part is just data connectivity, right? Like the world shouldn't be built by business people that download and upload CSV and then update their analysis every time manually. And so those were the motivations for us to build Rows. And we're attacking this big market, and I think this is in the end my company's why you should listen to me.
Nice. It is indeed a big market. I think it's the biggest competitor you can have, Google Sheets and Excel. You kind of mentioned it already, like integrations going forward. But I think the biggest thing for you is going to be having a clear product strategy, how you're going to beat them, right? So we're going to start with the basics, and then we're going to dive a bit deeper. Just a really basic question, why should a SaaS have a clear product strategy?
Well, I think you need a product strategy to give direction to your team and to your company, right? It's more of an organizational advantage that you create for yourself because you free your team up to work on the right things. So you otherwise you would have to, without a proper product strategy on a very high level that is very clearly defined, that everybody in the organization knows, especially your engineers and your designers, you will have to enter a very nitty-gritty process to work on your product and on your tech. If you have a very clear product strategy, I think you give more freedom to your, especially again to your engineers and designers, to do what they have to do and also to be creative, right? If you don't give them a lot of freedom, I think you will kill a lot of creativity in the process.
Yeah, I guess you have a clear opinion on how you should do it. Like, what does an ideal strategy look like? As in, freedom? Are there any topics?
Well, I think what should be in a product strategy is, well, first of all, you need to articulate a clear vision, right? And in the vision, you should say who you address, so who your product is for, and then what type of problem they have, and how they solve it today, and how with your product they will solve it in the future, right? So what are the big USPs compared to your competition? And I think those are the primary things that you need to find. Obviously, well, part of it should be kind of the ICP, ideal customer profile, the definition of the use cases, and then I think you get down to kind of the building blocks of your product, right? Which could be kind of larger building blocks, or you can also talk about jobs to be done there, and then you end up prioritizing those, and you organize this in a longer term roadmap, right? I think that's it.
Nice. And at the beginning, in your intro, you already said you're going to focus on integrations. You guys have a lot of integrations, so it's a big focus. How important are integrations within a product strategy for you?
Well, for us, integrations are very important. As I said, the key differentiators of Rows is the sharing experience with our new interface, and the second one is connectivity and integrations. We have over 50 integrations. Those are key to the connectivity piece, right? So
yeah,
quite important.
And you don't charge for them. So you build these integrations, you don't charge for them. Like, what kind of impact do they have on the revenue or on the growth of the company?
So, well, I think, first of all, integrations clearly give value to our users and to our customers. We know that they're a big value driver. When we ask them, when we ask people why are you using Rows, integrations is actually the most mentioned thing. Then, on the other hand, what you also have to keep in mind is you want a pricing that is easily understandable, very simple, and that is also very easy to build, right? And there's a certain tension between those things. I think given that integrations are a value driver, one can for sure charge for them. A couple of our competitors or other products in the no-code space that are very integrations focused, they do charge for integrations, but we only do it in a subtler way. We lump all integrations together, and after a certain number of executions, so we are a freemium product, so you have a free plan. After 10,000 executions of integrations in a month, you would have to upgrade, right? But this is the only way we're currently charging for them. I think, well, it's something that we're not considering in the very short term, but I think over time, it's a possibility that we would charge for some premium integrations. For example, if you're using Rows with your Salesforce data, you're already paying for Salesforce. So there should be a way for you. Rows in general, if you're taking kind of our first paid plan, it's not a very expensive product compared to Salesforce. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be willing to pay for that. Right?
Yeah, I think Salesforce is a good example where normally it's a paid integration. You mentioned people are getting value out of them. Do you also see it on the churn side? Do people churn less when they have more integrations? Is there a correlation between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So the more different types of integrations, well, there are three drivers of retention. How big is your workspace? So how many people did you invite to your workspace? How many spreadsheets are you using in your workspace, and how many integrations are you using? So if you're using different types of integrations and you're layering on value for you, you're certainly less likely to churn.
Yeah, nice. And it's really nice. You mentioned over 50 integrations, which is really cool for the clients, which could become a hassle on your side as into maintaining them. Like, what are the biggest challenges of having so many integrations?
Yeah, Just one thing that I still wanted to share about the previous question. So when you have what we do see in our integration related to retention is we have these trial integrations, right, that are easy for people to start using. And so, for example, you can enrich company data. You can enrich domains with company data very easily. You don't need a third-party account for that. Anyone can try it. You can well, interact with your Twitter account. Almost everyone has a Twitter account. So you can get stock data from a partner of ours called AlphaVantage, and FX data and so on. Those are very easy trials for integrations. There we actually see a lower retention rate, maybe 20% retention rate or so. And then we have kind of integrations that are more meaningful in the sense of the workflow, or you connect them to a workflow, and they're also generally deeper tools. For example, if you're using BigQuery, if you're using Facebook ads, or if you're using, we also have these generic web requests, so you can send, this is a bit more technical, but you can send a get, put, post, or patch request to any API directly from your Rows spreadsheet, and then work with this data in your spreadsheet. So people who do that are much more likely to retain in our product, right? And now, what does it mean for us? Obviously, it means a lot of work. Yeah? So maintaining integrations is quite tough. Yep. On the one hand, you have changes in the API of your partners, right? So Facebook does an API change. Now, famously, recently, Twitter did some changes in their API, and that causes work for us, right? We have to keep our product functional, and we have to keep it improving. So that is one thing. And then there is another type of work, which is we just become better at integrations overall, right? So we can, for example, we learned how to solve user problems more and more under the hood. For example, pagination, right? Lots of APIs, or rate limiting as well. Lots of APIs, or almost any API, has some sort of rate limiting or pagination. And so they, for example, return only a list of 100 of your customers, 100 of your leads or so with one request. And then you build the first version of your integration in a simple way, and then you learn how to abstract from difficulty for your user, and then you've built a number of integrations in the meantime, and you actually have to improve all of them, right? Yeah. The same related to, for example, infrastructure. If you change something bigger in the infrastructure of your integrations to make them faster, more performant, more scalable, you might have to port them to that new infrastructure. So these types of work is definitely a work driver for us. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of work, but in the end, if they get value out of it, then you have to continue, of course. I guess the next question is, clients have a lot of feedback, right? They have a lot of requests. How much do you involve your clients in determining your product strategy at the moment?
Well, we do speak to our users and customers a lot, right? Every day we speak to them, and that obviously has a big impact on our decision making. We also have these surveys about what they're getting value, how they're getting value, what we need to improve, and so on, and that also impacts our decision making. So in general, I would say this is very important, and we do it a lot. But there is, I would say, a certain tension sometimes with your vision, and we've made actually our fair share of mistakes there. So the first, well, I have to go back to when we started building connectivity and integrations into our product. The first thing that we gave to our users were actually generic web requests, like a GET request as a spreadsheet function. And we looked at what types of problems are our users solving with that. And what they did was they sent a lot of messages, like SMS, for example, or emails, or they got data, well, enrichment data for lead gen purposes, for sales purposes. For example, getting email addresses of people, trying, well, there are services like Clearbit or so, getting company information about leads and so on. And then we started, again, abstracting from difficulty, because this was what our users at the time wanted, and we got on a track of building more and more lead gen integrations. That, I think, ran a bit counter to our vision of building a better spreadsheet, because the people we attracted were actually, for a large part, not real spreadsheet users who wanted to build a spreadsheet and who wanted to use it with a team, but rather people who wanted the data. So we ended up competing as maybe less expensive or but more cumbersome Zoom info or so, with people who actually wanted data for their sales. But that wasn't a great fit with our spreadsheet vision. And so we spent maybe close to a year of building kind of the wrong type of integrations, because we listened a bit too much to our customers. And then we corrected this over time. Now, actually, most people use Rows with integrations as an import to create beautiful and automated reports for their teams, right? So especially in marketing, product managers, founders of startups, those are the people who use Rows for reporting. And with CRM data, data warehouse data, marketing channel data, and so on. And those are the right types of integrations that, as we found out, that are more natural for natural spreadsheet users.
Yeah. That's really interesting. At one point, you kind of went really niche, maybe to the growth hackers, to the salespeople, and now you took a step back and going back to, I guess, the original thing, trying to beat Google Sheets and to be for everybody.
Yep. Yep.
Nice.
Correct.
You also integrated OpenAI, ChatGPT. It's on the rise. Like, everybody, of course, wants to integrate with it. How important do you think it is to incorporate AI within your SaaS?
I think it's very important. So we'll actually have a panel about AI in particular later today. But I think AI represents a big opportunity for any software product, and it will change a lot of things. So we, for example, we were, I think, very fast to build the first native OpenAI integration in a spreadsheet, and people use that, for example, for sensitivity analysis, for data cleanup, for categorization, also to make to generate data programmatically in a spreadsheet. So they have, for example, a lead scoring model, and then want to generate particular particular emails or messages for those types of leads, right? And we were the first to do this in a spreadsheet, and that has served us very well. It's kind of our #1 integration, the OpenAI integration, and now we're thinking of how to build this capability of large language models more deeply in our product, right? In our with our particular product, so with the spreadsheet interface, we believe that it will change the way people get insights from their data. And so this is our current focus. But there are other areas for AI in a spreadsheet. For example, in the way you want to input what you want to do, right, in a more natural language that then gets translated into the logic of formulas or functions, or that maybe gets translated into charts and data visualization. I think that would be another area. And I believe that well, for whatever software you're working on, now is the time to, well, you shouldn't implement AI. I think we just discussed this before we came on here. You shouldn't implement AI just as a gimmick, as a toy. But I think you have to rethink how it can deliver value for your customers and for your users. And there will be opportunities, and over time, the companies who do this super well will reset customer expectations and user expectations for software, and then everybody else, they will win market share, and everybody else will have to catch up. So I think it's better to be a leader on this, and it will for sure change logic in software. It will change interfaces, and yeah, so it will have a huge impact, I think, for the industry.
And it's really nice to hear that you mentioned it's a #1 integration, and of course it has to drive value. Can you also talk about a little bit business things, as in, did it brought you a lot of more signups? Did it decrease churn? Like, what did it really bring to you besides, I guess, value?
Well, it definitely increased signups, right? Yeah. That I think is the #1 thing of this integration. I think when we look at the churn rates per integration, it's more because it's also fairly easy to try out.
Yeah.
It's kind of an average, right? The more deeper tools that are used to import data into Rows and then build reports, they show better retention rates, for example, than OpenAI. But we think that now, as we integrate the capability more deeply, it will for sure improve everything: acquisition, activation, retention, because it will, I think it will massively improve the core use case of Rows.
Yeah, yeah, and as you mentioned, it's a quick one to implement, but it's also a quick one to drop if it doesn't bring the value they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. There are lots, we're trying all sorts of things with ChatGPT, right? Yeah. And what we saw, for example, we first only released one function called Ask OpenAI, and you could just write any prompt in a spreadsheet function. Yeah. But then we learned, okay, well, it's actually for internally we have a couple of people on our team who became really good at prompt writing, and so you have to be, if you want a very in spreadsheets, for example, you often want a very narrow output. For example, in address cleanup, you want to say only return the zip code of this address, right? Don't return anything else. Or in sentiment analysis, only return positive, negative, and neutral, but nothing else. And if you don't write the prompt very specifically, OpenAI and other large language models tend to be a bit flimsy on the output and return a full sentence or so. That makes it hard to use in a spreadsheet, right? For then to build reports, for example, on top of it. So we actually created a bunch of very specific functions like classify OpenAI or so, that makes that part easier, and you don't have to be a prompt writing expert in order to get good value out of it, right? And I think this kind of optimization of bringing the really great prompt writing skills more under the hood of your products, I think this will also continue across the board.
Yeah, nice. When we zoom out again, talk about creating a product strategy. You already mentioned you have to focus on the value of your clients. You have to keep your ICP, your ideal customer profile, in mind. What kind of common mistakes do you see companies making while creating a product strategy?
Well, I think there's two. One is often people are not ambitious enough. Yeah. So in IT, as I think we all know, everything takes longer than expected. And whatever you're trying to do, there will always be situations in which you will have to water it down a bit, de-scope a bit, or you just accept that it takes longer, which over time de-scopes what you'll want to do. So you're diluting a bit your vision anyway. Now, if you don't aim high enough, if you're kind of shooting for something mediocre, then I think you won't really tip the needle for anyone. Yeah, I think this is one part. The other mistake, I think, is, while I have my highest respect for product managers who are extremely good at writing specs specifically, and who are extremely good at understanding the business, I think as a company you shouldn't make product the the main discipline. And that is because product, at the end of the day, like product management in the sense of project management, it's an accounting exercise, right? And it kind of kills creativity. I think what is important is to only in product set kind of the right boundaries for your engineers and for your designers to do amazing work, right? And so I think if you're making product kind of the main discipline that runs everything, it really kills creativity. Yeah.
Nice. And in the end, you want to keep aiming high, as you mentioned. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So we, for example, at Rows, we also do hackathons quite frequently, and we do them for anything between 2 days and 2 weeks to give really a lot of freedom to our engineers and to our designers, because I think this is really where great stuff emerges, right? And if they understand who your customers are, the problems that you're trying to solve, kind of, I think those are kind of the most important things. Again, product strategy, but then don't kill them with process. Right?
Yeah, nice. We got the 5-minute mark. So coming to the end, I always like to ask these 2 questions at the end of the show. What kind of advice would you give other B2B SaaS founders when they're trying to grow to 10K monthly recurring revenue?
Well, I think when it comes to product, I think articulate your product vision clearly, and then run experiments with your engineers at a super high rate. Right? So experiment a lot, technically as well. Right? So try to find kind of the best technical solutions for your problems. Don't are anxious to rewrite stuff in your platform, yeah, just I think it's also statistics shows that it's kind of the #1 success metric for successful startups is kind of the rate of experimentation and the rate of building and shipping, right? And I think this is the #1 advice for the early days. Yeah.
Nice. And then when we go past that 10K monthly recurring revenue, so we're gonna grow to 1 million ARR, what would we there advise?
Well, I think depending on what you're doing at this point, and depending on whether you're bootstrapping or whether you are venture capital funded, you might have a team of between, I don't know, 8 and maybe 30 engineers or so. So you have a bit of a larger team. I think then it becomes more important in product to build more of a process that makes sense, right? So we, for example, we follow kind of the agile philosophy at Rows, but again, I'm not a fan. We're not a fan of super heavy process, so we don't follow kind of all the meetings. We're actually cutting a lot of meetings for engineers from kind of from the Scrum methodology, for example, and but we have, for example, our quarterly roadmap prioritization. That is very important for us. So we have different teams that are comprised of engineers, designers, product managers, and engineering managers as well. And there are usually 3 people across those disciplines that are what we call the cell leadership. The cell leadership has the task, so we publish an updated product strategy at every kickoff of our quarterly process, and then they have essentially 2 weeks to present their challenges for the coming quarter. These 3 people in collaboration with the entire team, and then we use 2 days to in which we as founders and as a management team altogether, challenge the roadmap for the next quarter of this what we call cell leadership, right? Of these 3 people.
Yeah.
And at the end of those 2 days, the challenges for the next quarter are well described. It's kind of set in stone. Obviously, if the world changes, then we also adapt within the quarter. But this is, for example, the process that we're using, and it's served us quite well, I think. Yeah. So, but I think, and there's obviously, you don't have to do exactly how we do it. You can opt for every 6 weeks, or then obviously a lighter process, or you can do it every 6 months. But I think there should be like a cadence of planning that will enter what you're doing.
Yeah, and it comes back to what you said: experiment. So
yep.
also with this, I think our time is up. Check out Rows. As you mentioned it, more visual appealing, lots of integration. So definitely try them out. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you.